Okay, let's talk about it. We're about to tackle one of the most famous and maybe one of the most misused phrases in the entire Bible. It's a line you've probably heard a million times, everywhere from family dinners to internet comment sections. Yep, that's the one. Don't judge. It's kind of the ultimate conversation stopper, isn't it? The minute a discussion starts to get into right and wrong or personal choices, someone inevitably pulls this one out. But what did it originally mean? So the way it's often used today pushes this idea of, radical, unconditional acceptance of, well, everything. The thinking goes that to be a good person, you should never correct anyone, never call anything into question, and just let it all slide. But that's the big question, right? Was Jesus telling us to completely abandon our sense of discernment, to just switch off our critical thinking? Or is there maybe a little more to the story? To figure that out, we have to go straight to the source. To really get to the bottom of this, we've got to go directly to the text where this all started. We're going to walk through the passage in the book of Matthew, chapter 7, pretty much line by line, to see what's really being said. And here it is, Matthew 7, verse 1. This is the verse that gets quoted constantly. Do not judge so that you will not be judged. Now, if you stop reading right there, the modern hands-off interpretation seems to make perfect sense. But is that really the whole picture? Is this a blanket command to just never make a judgment about anything or anyone, ever? As with any ancient text, context is absolutely everything. And the key to understanding this isn't just in that first line, it's in what comes immediately after. The very next sentence completely reframes the whole thing. See? There's an immediate clarification. The issue isn't whether we judge, it's how we judge. Jesus is explaining that the standard you apply to other people is the very same standard that's going to get applied right back to you. And then he gives this brilliant, unforgettable analogy. He talks about trying to pick a tiny speck of sawdust out of your friend's eye when you've got a massive wooden beam, a log, sticking out of your own. It's such a powerful picture of hypocrisy. Now, this right here is the clincher. This is the part that so often gets left out of the conversation. He doesn't say, once you notice the log in your own eye, just leave your brother's speck alone. No, he says the opposite. He says first, you deal with your own big stuff, and then you'll be in a position to actually help your brother with his smaller issue. So the goal isn't to ignore the problem in your brother's eye at all. It's to get yourself right first so you can help them with humility and clarity. This isn't a command to do nothing. It's a command to act, but to make sure you act in the right order. This brings us to a really key concept: righteous judgment. It's not about condemning people from some high and mighty place. It's about discerning right from wrong, but only after you've taken a good, long, humble look at your own life first. And this idea isn't just a one-off thing, isolated to this one passage. I mean, it's a complex topic with different interpretations, for sure. But if we look at other parts of the Bible, we see this theme of judging correctly is actually a pretty consistent thread. For example, in the book of John, Jesus says it even more directly. He draws a super clear line. Don't just judge by superficial appearances. Instead, he explicitly commands his listeners to judge with righteous judgment. It's an instruction to judge, but to do it the right way. The Apostle Paul totally understood this teaching. When he was writing to the church in Corinth, he asks them this really pointed question. He's not contradicting Jesus. He's applying his teaching to a real-life situation about community responsibility. And the context here is crucial. There was a man in their community who was involved in some openly destructive behavior, and the church was just ignoring it, probably thinking they were being non-judgmental. Well, Paul doesn't praise them for their tolerance. He actually rebukes them for their failure to act, for their failure to judge what was happening in their own community. And then in Galatians, we see the goal of all this. It says if someone is caught in a trespass, you should restore them. Well, think about that. How can you restore someone if you're not allowed to first recognize that they've gone astray? Restoration itself requires discernment. It requires judging that something is wrong, all with the ultimate goal of gently helping that person find their way back. So, when we start putting all these pieces together, a much clearer picture starts to emerge. Jesus wasn't against the act of discernment itself. He was against the attitude with which it was so often being done. So the distinction becomes crystal clear. What was being condemned was hypocritical, self-righteous judgment. The log in your own eye kind of thing. But what was actually being commanded was something totally different. Righteous judgment, humble correction, and loving discernment. It's all about the heart and the motivation behind the action. So let's just contrast the modern cultural take with what the texts seem to be saying. The culture often says, don't judge means you have to accept and approve of everything. But the source material suggests that to judge righteously means you love people enough to actually care about the direction their life is going. And this idea is reinforced in other places, like Ephesians chapter 5. The instruction there isn't just to avoid wrongdoing, but to expose it. And I mean, how can you possibly expose something without first judging that it needs to be brought into the light? So if just saying don't judge completely misses the point, what's a better way forward? How do we apply this principle in a way that is both truthful and actually loving? Well, instead of just that simple phrase, a more accurate framework might be this. First, make it your goal to judge righteously, not just on the surface. Second, always start with self-examination. Check for that log in your own eye. And third, if you do need to speak up, do it with humility and with genuine love for the other person. And all this really brings us to a final, challenging question we have to ask ourselves. When we use the phrase, don't judge, to shut down a conversation, are we really trying to be more loving and humble, or are we maybe just trying to avoid an uncomfortable truth? That's definitely a question worth thinking about.